way in America, in the world right now. Just a couple of random readings around the internet will tell us that. This is the column by Maureen Nailed, the famous New York Times columnist. I felt sad talking to friends dropping daughters at college to hear of rampant anxiety, campuses awash in SSRIs, that's antidepressants, serotonin boosters found in drugs like Prozac and Lexapro, and long waits for therapy. It is a major topic among moms. I should point out the moms that Maureen Dowd's not a mom. The moms she hangs out with are pretty privileged people. Among moms, daughters struggling with anxiety or the effects of anti-anxiety medications, which can include weight gain and loss of libido. Many young college women are ping-ponging between anxiety without pills and numbness and body insecurity with them. Holy mackerel. And this is America. Let me move on. This is an article that appeared in the Free Press, written by a 16-year-old girl.
So that first one before months was the dilemma there is can't live with them, live without them in terms of antidepressants.
Yeah.
Is that what they're saying? Yeah. Okay.
This
I'm
is
following.
Free Press, and it was written by a 16-year-old girl. Today I'm 16, and my peers are suffering from an addiction to what many call the new drug, by which they mean porn is the disastrous replacement for intimacy among my sexless, anxiety-ridden generation. That's a 16-year-old. My sexless, anxiety-ridden generation. And let me just a third piece that was also in the New York Times. This is the aftermath of COVID lockdown. The situation is alarming parents and scientists too. There will be a period of epic withdrawal, said Keith Humphreys, a professor of psychology at Stanford University, an addiction expert and a former senior advisor to President Barack Obama on drug policy. It will, he said, require young people to sustain attention in normal interactions without getting a reward hit every few seconds. Zach, this is where you come in. You're a person that tends to deal with situations that other people find defeatist and anxiety producing. You have a 5-year-old daughter and you work with school kids of all ages, kids and ones who are graduating. And I know that you're not as pessimistic and depressed sounding as those people, Keith Humphreys, Maureen Dowd, that 16-year-old girl. I want you, if you can, to convince viewers and reassure viewers that this is still a world that we can manage for kids, well, and adults as well, and parents.
Now I had an idea that you were going to ask me to do that, but I wasn't exactly sure what you were going to ask me to do. So people know, like on the fly, let's see if I can figure out a scenario that would convince anybody. Okay, case study. There was I just before we got on was talking about a student I used to teach at a private school. And the private school was you could think Montessori, that kind of a thing, and all those kind of private schools with specific curriculum. It's funny, I don't know that the curriculum is per se magical or anything, but the environment is. It's like people can be kids. There's space. There's room. There's not an agenda pushing the way. It's kids leading the way. And I remember this student at this school was like people would describe him, anyone who knew him, kids or adults, would say he's quirky, he's fun, he's smart, he's a great fit for this place. And I think if you asked him to describe himself then, he would describe himself that way too. I don't remember the circumstances, but he moved to a middle school that was a public middle school. And someone I happened to know there was saying, "Hey, didn't you used to work at this place? We got a kid from here, and he's like, he just can't fit in. He can't conform. He can't do anything. Like he's not fitting in. He's doing nothing. He can't access the material. I don't know what's going on with him." And the ask was to consult based on um, what's wrong with the kid in this place. And I told her what I told you. I said, that's not the person I know. And I don't think that something magically or dramatically changed in the few weeks from when I saw him in this environment there. I think the environment is wrong. It doesn't sound like you have a lot of space for this kid. I don't know if there was a happy ending or not, but I guess I'm trying to lay the groundwork for saying that there isn't the idea that what's going to save the day is a series of therapies or specific therapies, or what's going to save the day in terms of malaise or kids becoming addicted to something or isolated is SSRIs. That all comes from that same disease model that you've been pounding against for the last 50 years. And it's wrong. That's magical thinking, like something is diseased this kid. And there's no better example I can think of than this student who transferred and in 2 weeks became labeled a different person. They had to adapt their environment to be able to get him what he needed, help him pursue passions that he found interesting. And the guy, I don't know where he is now, but I'm gonna guess. Since he's in high school, I think I'm guessing he's probably coding. I'm guessing he's probably in a variety of clubs. I guess he's probably found a niche in teachers who think he's great. And that's what I find with a lot of kids that I work with. And the remedy for this isolation or people trying to seek these involvements that wind up being hurtful to them is, as I think you put it recently, getting a life. And sometimes it's hard to get a life in an environment that feels toxic, or if you feel like you're being constantly watched for, safety or risk concerns, like playing outside on a street. So I have seen that it's possible in a very practical way to help children succeed and move past what seems like an inevitably drawn out period of their lives that that is going to encapsulate them forever. No, it's not. They grow up and they find their niche. And I've found that people in schools, if they use some basic sense, help them find their niche earlier on and help them form an identity of themselves as constructive in society earlier on. And the earlier and the more, the better. I don't know if that's convincing, but I guess that's what
imagines two alternatives. You're either on antidepressants or you're overcome with anxiety.
Right.
Those are the two things.
I reject the dichotomy. Right. Yeah.
The 16-year-old girl describes her friends. Well, I mean, one funny thing is, given that they're addicted to pornography, is they're sexless. But to have sex, you have to interact with other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then going to Keith Humphreys, you're getting kids who are coming off of the COVID lockdown. And the way that we tend to think of dealing with all of these things, the only way we conceive of it is, well, what kind of therapy can we get? And everybody thinks that's a positive outlook. What you and I think of as a positive outlook is people having a purpose in life and becoming engaged in life. That's the be all and end all for us. Everything else, I think the kid that you described at the beginning, Everything else is secondary and slapdash. You take it. You're shaking your head so vigorously.
I'm just agreeing with you. I don't know if I could add something that's better than what you said.
If you don't mind my asking you a personal question, do you worry about your 5-year-old daughter? She's not being dropped off of college. Do you worry about how she'll face up to this world that Maureen Dowd is describing? Maureen Dowd only knows educated rich people. You know what I mean?
Mm.
She's not slumming. And even they can't help create a world that their daughters feel is worth living in.
Okay, so quirky, fun, creative kid, and she's going to go to a public school, and she'll do it next year. And she's going to go to my public school, and I still have worries about it, and I'm trying to reconstruct it. But ultimately, she will find the agency to be able to connect, I think. And I think the kids I work with can do that too, even in a small sphere of their lives. There are ways that they realize, and I convince them, or they convince themselves, because it's true, that they really matter. They do something that's really amazing for themselves and for other people and for the world. And no matter what else, no one can take that away from them. And so that I don't worry based on that in the long term.
What you and I both believe is that if a child becomes engaged in life, you're somewhere like, I don't know, halfway to 90% there. I'll just tell
Right.
a story from my past. I used to go swimming at a Jewish center, and the guy who was in charge of it, I got talking with him one time, and he said, my son, when he graduated from high school, they called me in and they said, your son hasn't been going to school. Now, any parent in the world, red flags will go up. And so he said, to his son, where have you been going? And this is a near-in suburb of in New Jersey, of Newark. And he said, I've been going to Broadway plays. And his father goes, uh-huh. And why do you go to Broadway plays? He said, well, I really like them. I think I can become involved in them. Jump to the present. He became Edward Albee's stage director, and Albee's plays are being put on all around the country. And Albee's, he's dead, one of our great modern directors. And so his father sort of wisely didn't freak out. His reaction was, well, there's something he wants to do. He really wants to do it. I mean, how many high school kids have the initiative to get a bus ticket and buy tickets to Broadway shows all the time? And I think you and I both are hyper tuned into when a kid has some kind of passion, something that really motivates them. If they've got that, you and I are going to be pretty relaxed and peaceful. We don't want them committing crimes or anything, but we don't want them flunking out of school. But you and I are going to be pretty relaxed. And if anybody would confront us, or if a school would say, your son's not been going to school, we would hasten to say, well, yes, but he's been very productively involved. And I know you as a school person would say, maybe you could change his thesis to trends in modern Broadway or something,
Right.
Let's go where he's going. You know what I mean? It's a constructive task he's created for himself.
You
If it wasn't traditional academics, or if it didn't have a job label attached to it, you wouldn't be worried. That you wouldn't sit around, you wouldn't stay up at night worrying, oh my God, what kind of a job is she going to get? Because you and I, we know people who've had the worst outcomes. I was just referring an article to you written by a mother whose daughter was written, actually, it was written by a man we know named Anderson, Ken Anderson.
Mhm.
And her daughter died at age 28 of a heart infection from injecting bad heroin or dirty heroin needles. And when you look at things like that, you tend to, my reaction always is, what purpose did she have in life? What was she positively engaged by? All the fancy talk about, well, she could have gone to better therapy. Even, oh, we needed harm reduction techniques, like she should have been given buprenorphine or methadone. All of
Mhm.
those things are sidelines to me. The question is the child, or 28 is an adult, engaged in life? Does she have a positive motivation? Does she have a purpose to use her? And she was a smart and attractive young woman. That's the that's the question to be asked. Not what kind of therapy does she go to, even what kind of school, like, the student you're talking about changed schools. It's not even the school, although that's your job to make a school welcoming. The question is the person have their gears on in life? Once you believe that, it allows you to just loosen up in terms of what you're permitting your child to do, what you're willing to allow your child to do. Uh, I mean, bad things happen to people all the time, but the stories that those girls are going to the best colleges in the country, the more renowned ones, and yet they're tortured and they're carrying that around inside themselves. The worst dangers that people face are those dangers that they present in their own lives, their lack of good feelings about themselves, the things they may end up doing to themselves. Anything that works against that, even if it carries a certain amount of risks, are things that I think you and I are not only willing to tolerate, but willing to encourage, even to
Mhm.
suggest to our kids, well, why don't you do X or Y? I don't know. Take a risk. That 16-year-old girl, she just wrote an article for a national publication. So,
Mhm.
I would say that's impossible. What 16-year-old can do that? You're a writer. Okay, you're going to have to spend a little more time outside of the house, maybe write letters to publications and suggest things. You've got a track in mind. Let's get on that
And not
track.
only that, by the way, she pissed me off because as any writer, well, you do it pretty well, but you know, the best thing you can do and the hardest thing to do is become concise. Use as few words as possible to describe, or as few words as you need to describe an entire point. It makes it very readable. And she did that. I'm sure it was heavily edited, but there's a 16-year-old that like had a knack for writing and had a reason for writing, and follow that. That's risky, but
And
she's
he
probably not going to
and
be
she had to interact with the editor. That's
right.
So
Yeah,
the editor
right,
says, we're going to rewrite a little. You can't freak out or think you're a dope. You have to
right.
say, well, they know more about magazines than me. We're going to collaborate.
Yeah. And
So,
you know what? I think that's better than sitting through a biology class that you don't want to be in. But whatever. Who asked me?
so you and I are two people, who had our ups and downs institutionally. But anybody who would look at us would say, well, they want to do something in life. and they have some skills and motivation to do those things. So it's strange. When I read these stories about kids facing these problems as young people, I think, well, I'm 77. I face the same problems as an old person. You know what I mean? Where am I going to go? How am I going to make enough money to keep going? How am I going to take care of myself? I'm inspired by those young people who actually face those situations and overcome them. They're inspirational to me. I think, oh, look at that. They face some difficulties, okay, but they overcame them. I can do it myself. They're my role models.
So yeah, if you want my quick take, I don't think society's doomed, but we sure would be if everyone believed that hyperbole, or I guess it's not hyperbole to them, but it's propagandistic kind of speak about the, yeah. Well, it's fine. There are new things.
When you read them, do you ignore them or what?
Do I ignore those articles?
Yeah.
No, but well, kind of. Like I feel like I've already read, but
When
for
you
you
read one of
sending
them, you
me,
read them all.
right? I feel I assume that, but sometimes you send me one that I wouldn't have found because I'm avoiding them. So I guess I'm living vicariously through you. And when you send me one that you say this is worth reading, I do it. I'm subscribed to the New York Times, so I see them sometimes. Anyway, yeah, I guess I avoid them more than you do. You can't help it. You have to see what they're saying.
I'm drawn to more negative stories than you, huh? You
I like to
have
feel good.
avoid them. You're good not reading them.
I'm helping bridge a community full of people from a wide range of value systems, classes, ethnicities, in a once only privileged town in Vermont. And so I like reading about what people are doing in that respect and what is working in positive.
So you've got that 16-year-old girl with a porno, all of Maureen Dowd's friends' daughters. You've got something, all those kids who were going through withdrawal from COVID lockdown. You've got something they don't have. You're engaged in something, you had to pay to do it. It's positive. You enjoy doing it. You have some skills at doing it. And it's like, all right, that's what I'm worried about. That's being engaged.
That's a good point. So to your point, I often go down the rabbit hole of negative articles or books or videos or whatever they are. Of late, I feel like I would go down that rabbit hole, but I don't really have time for it. So I'm just kind of like prioritizing. And funny enough, that therein enters our thesis that if you're engaged in life, you don't have time for the dumb shit that brings you down.
That's a so Zach Rose's solution is, well, frankly, I'd be more depressed by things if I had more time.
Right. If I wasn't so interested
to be depressed.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
We recommend for everybody. All right, Zach, we'll leave that word of wisdom. And the Life Process program is a program that engages people. It works with them collaboratively to find what's going to be engaging for them, because there's no shortcut to that getting ground into life.
Thanks for tying that together, Stanton. I always appreciate talking to you.
All right. Good talking to you. Bye now.